Welcome to the Surgery and Therapy Summit and interview with Dr. Mark Sheldon Lloyd, who is a plastic and reconstructive surgeon as well as an entrepreneur in the property investment space. Welcome, Dr. Lloyd. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks a lot for having me. It's a real honor, and I hope I provide some use to the audience out there listening. And it's great to be here. Thanks a lot.
So you are a plastic surgeon and you actually trained in the UK, which is a country that's very close to my heart. I spent 10 years in London. Yeah. And can you tell us a little bit about why you chose to be a surgeon, and then also why you've chosen the specialty that you have and the journey you've taken to get to where you are?
Yeah, so plastic surgery wasn't my first choice. I wanted to be a film composer like John Williams. I was a massive John Williams fan, still love playing John Williams on piano. And that's important because one of the things was it's very symphonic, it's very big. It's a very wide screen kind of way of putting yourself out there. But if you come back to why I did plastic surgery, it was kind of a process of, it was third on my list. I wanted to be a film composer. I think after watching Top Gun, I wanted to be a fighter pilot, but I didn't have the eyesight. So I'm wearing contact lenses at the moment, but I didn't have the eyesight, and I definitely wouldn't have had the fitness, knowing how fit I think you have to be.
Yeah.
And then I was doing a talk. Actually, I'd visited RAF bases all my life as a RAF cadet, Royal Air Force cadet, and I was really interested in the ejection seats and the medical sequelae from ejection from high-speed jets, supersonic jets. And I just stumbled across further historic research on what had happened to airmen in World War II. And I saw that actually those that suffered burns in the Battle of Britain were treated and they were reconstructed. And I suddenly thought, wow, this is really amazing. Who does this kind of surgery? And then I realized it was plastic surgeons. So in a kind of roundabout way, I found something that I was interested in. I thought, this is cool. If I can't be a film composer, and the reason I couldn't be a film composer was because my background was I was born and bred in the UK, but my father came over on a boat from British Guiana, South America, and was trained as a car mechanic. My mother, who was a very, prestigious lady, she flew over, and little did she know she was sitting next to the brother of my dad, which is my uncle, right? Okay. So when my dad went to pick up my uncle, he completely forgot about him and saw my mum and said, that's the lady I'm going to marry. And that's how they started. And it was her who drove that business. Now, the importance of that is money was very much talked about. It was a very difficult thing to obtain in the 60s. Yeah. And to start your own business, to have your own house was a big deal. And my parents achieved both. And not only that, they started to build up. So when I said I wanted to become a film composer, the first reaction was, that's not going to make any money. You're not going to make any money being a film composer. That's what other people do who are dreamers. You've got to do something practical. So there's a very practical, like, if you can't repair a car, yeah, if you can't serve someone in a practical way, we don't want to know you. It's just like, we're not going to support you on that. So yeah. The Air Force thing was a good thing. They thought that was a good thing, joining the Air Force. I still love the military and the Air Force. I suppose a lot of that is similar to the way I trained, it suited my personality for training as a surgeon.
Yes.
I was an easy guy to train as a surgeon. If you told me to do something, I'd do it. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I up for this? But I'd just go out and do it. So, but that was important. So that's how I discovered, through my love of ejection seat injuries, the Air Force, going back into history, discovering burnt airmen, I discovered plastic surgery. That's how I became a plastic surgeon. And that's what made, I wanted to be a plastic surgeon from day one of medical school. I knew exactly what I wanted from day one of medical school. I didn't have a clue how I was going to get there. And I never told anyone because I was too embarrassed. Because, it's kind of like saying, it's like saying when I say I want to own a Lamborghini, everyone goes, well, who do you think you are telling us that? It's like, it's a bit like Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, it's like, he thought he was bigger than his brothers. at that moment in time. They couldn't see it, but
Yeah.
it's the same thing. So you kind of feel a bit of an idiot when you say, like, but I kept that childhood dream and innocence continuously in my psyche. That's part of my personality still. So if someone says, I want to be this, I go, you're not thinking big enough. And that's always been definitely why I am driven to do what I do, because I always am thinking out, wide, really tall, really big. And it's not crazy. It's about just not, it's thinking in a big way. And I inherited that from my mother, whereas my father was a very much more I'm not a risk taker. So that's the reason why I ended up being the way I am, I think. So that explains it in a separate, that conceptualizes a few things in how I became a plastic surgeon and how I ended up being an entrepreneur, I think.
Amazing, because you also did 2 other master's degrees.
And I did three master's degrees. It was ridiculous. Yeah, and this shows you there's a real a lie in the world about this, and this is very important. We look at that. This comes back to having parents who weren't academic. If you look at what my parents were very good at, they were very good at cash flow. They're very, very good business people. They were very disciplined, and we had a great. I was never like, I didn't go from rags to riches. My dad was a car mechanic. I had a great life. I had everything I ever wanted. We had a beautiful big house. We had a great garden. We had a World War II air raid shelter. We used to always be playing in it as children. We had the best house. And I realized that, when I went to university, I realized that actually there were people whose parents were academic, who had lots of degrees, who didn't have our quality of life. And that's because my parents understood the value. I think they had a different set of values. They had struggled. It was difficult to start a business in the 60s, to start your own business, to make it successful. It's very start. I mean, I think 90% of businesses fail, right? So for my father to have opened a car repair business with my mother was the numbers lady. She was the brains. She was, definitely the boss. And for that to have grown and grown and grown was incredible. So the importance is that I think let me just get back to the question, because I always get so passionate, I always lose my train of thought. What was the original question you said? What was
your additional master's degree?
Oh, the initial degrees. Okay, yeah, that's right. So all these master's degrees, right? So this comes back to this. So I call it the kind of academic narcissism or academic vanity. To get into plastic surgery in the early 2000s was really tricky in the UK. And you literally just had to have loads of stuff to show that you were the best of the best, and also the best of the rest, because most people gave up. I mean, I started my surgical training. I was trained as a general surgeon. I started plastic surgery at the age of 33. Now, if you look at those degrees I did, yes, they were useful. I did all my research in information technology and also systematic review. So I learned a lot of statistics, which was very useful when it came to analyzing data, property. It gave me skills, but I never used them in plastic surgery. I used them a lot more in analyzing, property and deals. And also it took up a lot of time. And I feel that as a surgeon, there was almost like you had to show you had all these badges. And I don't want to sound like I'm grateful, but I don't think that's necessary to be a really great surgeon. I don't think that's all there. And I think we could have a lot of degrees, a lot of academia, but no common sense. And I see it in the modern schooling system, how our common sense is being drained out of us as we are taught things that are not useful in the real world. So I've got these degrees, but I'm thankful I did them, and it kind of looks good. Maybe you send an email and you're looking all authoritative, and you've got all these letters after your name. And my colleagues used to say, "How many degrees have you got? How many qualifications have you got?" I said, "Well, I've got quite a few, because I've got also these US exams. I'm legally qualified for doing expert witness work. I've got all these things." Now, I think the important thing about qualifications are, do they add to your skill set? Are they tools? And I found that also, are you doing degrees? I always ask people this: are you doing degrees because you enjoy being a student, or are you a student to do something, or Are you the eternal student? As in, you never want to go to work and have to face the problems of a business owner. And I think that's a really important thing. And I think when I came into the to social media with my views were, as an academic who had super specialized in plastic surgery to quite a high level, and as a property investor who built a significant portfolio, that I challenged even my own academia. So yeah, I've got these degrees, but if when people come down to say hi to me and like we're having a chat now, I never want those degrees to be seen. I mean, it's like people can be, people are in awe and respect of different things in life. I think it's very important to be in awe and respect of what hopefully are good character traits first, as opposed to what you have or how many degrees you've got or how big your house is.
Yeah.
I think and I think I strip away a lot of that, and a lot of that happened through just being challenged and having some really tough stuff I went through as a surgeon and in my personal life, and you become very, very much more. You don't worry about certain things and what people think about you about certain things. So yeah, I've got those degrees, but maybe someone's wowed with them, but I enjoyed them, but also they were a bit long-winded and maybe not the best use of time in the modern world now. I wouldn't recommend everyone does that. I don't think PhDs and all that are for everyone. I think it's for a very, very niche set of people nowadays. The world has changed and medicine's changed. That's what I think. So yeah.
Don't you also feel that our window to achieve the life we want to lead, actually, as you get older, you realize how short that window is? So do you want to be spending all 100%. Of your time learning doing these master's degrees, or do you want to get onto something like the property ladder and start becoming an investor, because you want to get out of being employed? You don't necessarily want to be in big business. Self-employed, well, you just realize that's hard. So being an investor is really going to get you to where you want to be. So how old were you when you first bought your first property?
So I was 23. And I actually was very disciplined as I was not. I was a very. I mean, I left school at 16, okay, because I was getting bullied. I got a job at McDonald's, and also I sold wills. That's the last will and testament as telephone sales in the evening. And then I also went to work with my dad. And in that year, I rebuilt my confidence as a person. I became me again. And then I had good enough grades to get a scholarship into A-level college. And the question, I think, just say the question again, because I'm linking into it. I just want to make sure I keep the question in mind.
So you bought your first property when you were 23.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, right. So I had savings. And then I became I realized that my dad had a very hard life. He did all his work as a mechanic lying down with stands. And that's hard. Now you go to most garages, they've got lifts, they've got lots of stuff that makes their life easier. And he used to work in the cold. He used to have very big thick hands and skin, and I just thought, God, his hands are so tough. I'm a weakling. And I also saw how important it was, and so I was very disciplined, and I didn't get into debt as a student. And some people may find that very difficult. I didn't drink, didn't go out that much. I collected Prince records. I think I was obsessed with collecting Prince records. I collected so much Prince records. I said, I such a, one day it might be worth more than a property, you never know. But I've got so much vinyl and so much stuff. And I used to be into my cars. And I remember that was always me. That was me. And I used to always never used to drink, never used to do anything crazy. And when I finished medical school, my father said, look, you're a great son. And he helped me out. He said, here's a bit of money, but I had my savings as well. And I said, oh, thanks, Dad. But I was not didn't know really what to do with it. And then my mother said, oh, how parents are. They're always listening to, conversations in the house, and they come in and put their head around the door and interrupt and start, getting involved. And you think, what's going on with you two? And she goes, well, you need to. She saw I had flash tastes, because I sense it when I see other people. I mean, I see what people see what what clothes you're looking at on Instagram, or what cars you're looking. You look at, and I had all my model cars all laid out. I had car magazines all perfectly filed, every road test. And she goes, "You've got very flash taste." She goes, "You'll never, ever, ever get that just being on one income stream. You've got to add. And I
Yeah.
said, really, I've got to do more than one thing. That's crazy. How am I going to do that? And she goes, no, you can. So I bought the first property when I was 23. And I remember house hunting. I just literally did what I normally do. I just look at the biggest thing and go, that will do. That's great. I can imagine having a great life in that. And it was. And that house I kept for many years up until the pandemic, really.
Yeah, wow.
And and that house was how I learned property. And when everyone was going, I remember I just started getting to know this beautiful Brazilian girl, and I planned a date and everything, and with this girl, and then my mum, amazing lady, but she's famous. She goes, oh, by the way, you need to sort out the house. And I said, what date are we sorting out the house? And it was the same night or same day that I just arranged this date with this beautiful Brazilian girl. And my heart sank. It's like I was a complete, no one. It's like as a guy, no girl really paid attention to me. I think up until the age of 40, that's when people started to realize I was a bit interesting. I was always the guy, never did well going out in clubs, never
Yeah.
did well like out on a night out, always left behind, last to be chosen. That's me, a lovable loser. Cars always broke down on dates, always that guy. So when I found, I said, no, not again. My last hope of happiness has been ruined again. But and then all the way she came and we were doing the property and I was turning bed mattresses. I was learning how to do this and where everything was. And she goes, you're so distracted. All you're thinking about are, girls and love it. And I said, oh, yeah, it's so hard. Everyone's out having a good time and I'm here. But that house made me a lot of money. And that house funded my education to get me my, United States medical license exams, to get myself started in the States, to finish my training. And that house taught me about property and how to rent property out. She was a great person, and she was a very strict. She's strict. My parents were very strict.
Yeah.
I wasn't a difficult son. I did what I was told to do, but I would get cross. It's like
Yeah.
I wanted to go out with my friends, or I remember things like that, rimming a wheel on your car and stuff like that. Your dad saying, what are you doing? You've got to be careful. You've got, these things cost money. It's like, oh, dad, just going out with the guys. So I had all that stuff, but I always was focused. And I think learning how to rent a property out, how to buy a property, how to rent a property, that was instilled with me the day I left medical school. So when I went into work as a doctor, I had two income streams.
Yeah.
So I always was both, but I couldn't reveal one to the other. It's a bit like Clark Kent and Superman, right? You've got to be, every superhero has to wear a mask in public. That's how you have to be.
Yeah.
And you can't reveal your superpowers. And everyone's got a weakness, right? So everyone's got their thing that if you expose Superman to kryptonite, he will start to get weak.
Yeah.
So if you expose Mark Lloyd to fancy cars, he starts to get weak. He starts doing man maths. Money moves in different ways. So everyone's got their vice. Everyone's got their thing. You've got to know yourself. But that's exactly right. So I went into medicine knowing that when people were complaining about the hours and the pay, which they didn't do in the 90s, you were well paid and you earned a lot of money because you never had time to spend it because you were always working.
Yeah.
You see, so you never had time to spend money because you were working 100 hours a week. So you'd earn your money, go back to your flat. And I remember it was fun. I loved working hard because that's when I realized that all the academia that didn't make you a great doctor. What made you a great doctor is could you practically problem solve? Did you know structure? Did you know anatomy? Did you know where things were? Did you know how to do practical tasks like cannulate, start a drip, look after patients? And that I fitted into that brilliantly, and I did really well as a surgical doctor. Whereas as a medical student, I failed surgery at medical school. That's how good I was,
Yeah.
So I had to resit it in the summer. I had to, again, use my summer to resit exams like a lovable loser. And, that was it. So that was the reality of my life. So, yeah, so got into property, bought the property at 23, and that property I kept for probably 20 odd years. Yeah. Yeah.
And so you now coach medical professionals on how to become property investors.
Yeah, that's right. Or refine them, or give them a lot more insight into what they could be doing. Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say, that it's better to have one big property or lots of, a few cheaper ones that make you lots of rental? I mean, does it become tricky managing lots of properties, or obviously you just get agents to do that? But kind of, what is your strategy?
Okay, so strategy, this is a really good question. And this is a really important question. And it's a good question because it's a question that has been, as age, it's got a timelessness to it, because this is an evergreen question, because it's something that's consistently debated in investors.
Mm.
And you've got to address it clearly and wake up knowing what you're actually going to do.
Mm.
The importance, I think, in property is cash flow. How you get there is irrelevant. If you've got one big property in Knightsbridge that's renting out for loads of money, and you're getting great cash flow, and you're not spending money too much on expenses, that's good. If you've got like 100 properties all over the place and they're making you great cash flow, that's great. And the reason I say that is that you can use cash flow, but you can't use capital. You can't realize capital appreciation. So as the property is going up in value, you have to refinance. To refinance is like applying for the mortgage all over again. And you're going to have to pull money out of that property. And there's a lot of legal checks that have to be done. So it's harder to liquidate that and realize that potential in the property. So when people say what strategy I have, also you've got to know, what is your stress level? What's your mental health stress level? Everyone's mental health gets battered over time. And your ability to tolerate certain stresses depends on what else is going on in your life. So I recently attended a business retreat with a group of multimillionaires. And one of the guys who was teaching us or chatting to us was Al Barrett, who created the Grenade Bar, the Grenade Protein Bar.
Yes.
So he sold his business, I think, to Montelus, who's the largest confectionery maker. You've got Montelus, and then you've got Giovanni Ferrero, who's a multi-billionaire. He's the guy who makes Ferrero Rocher, all those chocolates that you use at Christmas, and you just got to finish the whole box, right? So he sold the business for 200 million, and he was going through extreme stress whilst also going through a separation with his wife. And it was when you described it, everyone was like, you could feel yourself like almost tensing up. It was so painful, the whole process. Just go back to the question again, because I'm going to link in this. I often do this. I get very passionate and then I lose tangent. But link it into the question, because I know a lot of entrepreneurs do. I like that, because we're all over the passionate and fired up. Yeah. But what was the question again?
It's all about strategy and
strategy. Okay. Yeah, cash flow. So the strategy, the reason I'm talking about that stress is that what is your strategy? You have to have one aim, and his aim was to make money, to make this successful, right? How you get there is irrelevant, in the sense of, some people may have single lets, some people may have houses of multiple occupation, some people may do serviced accommodation. But what you've got to know is all the strategies that are currently available and when to pivot, because governments will change, tax laws will change, tenants will change. If you try to do student accommodation now compared to when I did it in 1997, students, Wi-Fi was not even a word in 1997. Okay, now everyone wants Wi-Fi. Everyone going, yeah, I want Wi-Fi, I want this, I want that. They want to live basically in a 4-star AC Marriott hotel. That's what student accommodation, that's what they want. The expectations have risen. And also, student accommodation, especially around university areas, has become so good that as a landlord, it's very difficult to compete to get those properties up to that standard and keep them up to that standard. If you look at what's going on with with the interest rates rising, buy to let as a strategy, if that's a strategy, then it's going to bring you less cash flow. You have to accept that. So you're going to have to accept, you're going to have to, pay less. If you're running houses of multiple occupation, you normally pay the bills. So your bills are going up with the energy crisis. So you're going to make less cash flow. So if you're you can't use, I would say in property, one of the things is very important is don't make single lets, multi-lets, houses of multiple occupation service combination a strategy. Make the strategy making cash flow that you can realize, because the cash flow is something that you can utilize and then build, make deposits, do deals, add you can create personal guarantees saying, I'm used to borrowing money, but I've got the money here, but I don't want to use it. That's my guarantee. And you can leverage the bank, you can leverage other investors. So I think it's important not to get too the word strategy with property gets often, people who are listening may say, oh, I just do this, or you may be running two houses of multiple occupation, you might be running single lets. I started with houses of multiple occupation. I had two and a studio flat for students. I now have a total of 7 high quality properties with a total worth of 3 million. I've got half, I'm leveraged at 50-50.
Yeah.
They're single lets, they're luxury single lets. They bring in great cash flow, minimal expenses, because I look at cash flow. Now it's changing and I'm actually pivoting into another form of property investment. But that's because that's what's needed. To create cash flow. So cash flow is very important. And I think in a business, cash flow is important. Why do we do private practice? Well, we do private practice because it makes cash flow. If I go out and I sit and work in Harley Street and then I go out and do my surgeries, I bring in cash. And that cash flow is great because if I do 3 operations, I get paid for 3 operations. If I do 5, I get paid for 5. That's great. I can use that money to invest. But I'm creating cash flow, extra cash flow. Now I'm trading effort for labor for money, right? I'm taking time and labor. Whereas in property, once you've done it, it's not passive. I thought people use this word passive income. There's no such thing as passive income. This morning, I was going through my jobs list just on 7 properties. Things are breaking, things need replacing. People are overcharging you. Some people are, you don't even know what the problem is. You've got to keep, you've got to keep asking questions like, is the tap broken? Is this working? What actually is the problem? So you've got to spend time on it, and it takes effort. It takes time. And then at the same time, my car didn't work this morning. It was so funny. It's a very first world problem, but I was taking the the Lambo down to have its service check, and there's this mechanism in the cars that if the doors go up in a Lambo, if the car's ever turned upside down, how do you get out? So the doors explode, they go bang, and they fly off, right? So I had the warning light flashing that this thing was going to happen as I was in the car. So I phoned up the guys and they said, yeah, best not to drive it. We don't want to, you don't want to be on the motorway and suddenly, you're driving along, suddenly you see this car and the doors explode off and you get hit, and so I had that going on this morning, and then a few funny things happen. So these are first world problems, but you create these new endeavors and dreams, and you have to take it on the chin. That's what I opted to do that. I said to my dad, I own these problems. I like owning my problems. I own these properties. I own these problems. I own, if people come to me with a problem, I own it. I focus on it and I get it done. And that's also a very important character trait in an entrepreneur. You've got to almost, it's a little bit kind of, masochistic. You've got to like the pain of having to deal with, you sort out one thing, you've got another thing. And also as you go up, I remember dealing with, it's like saying with cars. I remember my first car was this Mini, like the Italian job. It was that classic Mini. It went wrong, you think, oh, big deal. You go up to the next car, a bit more powerful. You've got more things going wrong with it. You go up to the supercar, you've got millions of things going wrong with it. And you think, I'm still going 70 miles an hour. I'm still going from A to B. I still want to go to the drive-through, get a coffee or something like that. I'm still doing the same things. Why has it become so much more complicated just going from A to B? It's because you aspire. You add more onto your life. You grow. And also you're growing with more experience. Like if someone came to me and said, you wanted to talk about property at this level, I can also talk about this level, but also much higher now. And your wealth of experience, and also the fact that you've beaten up so much, it's like the surgery. The more I've done, the more hits I've taken. Imagine if every operation was like going in, like a boxer going into a ring and taking hits. You get knocked out, you have to pick yourself up again. You've got all that experience. And that's the great thing about being an entrepreneur. What makes, I think, a great entrepreneur is someone who's willing to take 90% of rejection, 90% failure, but
Yeah.
their little bit of success catapults them. It completely
Yeah.
smothers the failure, and it's like just that one little seed allows that tree to grow bigger than all the other failures and weeds that were created by that same person. you
Yeah.
know you find the one fruit, and you stick with it. So I have a formula. I stick with it. I know who I am, and I know myself very well. I trust myself 100%. And if I don't feel like I trust myself, I've got other people in my network who's very, very kind, very, very gracious, who I can ring and say, I don't feel quite right making a decision today. Can you guide me? And I've got that to reach out to. So we went in a few different directions there, as with all questions I answer. But the purpose for those listening is that there are some important themes that are needed to understand how people become generally better off. I'm not going to say I'm successful, because some people would say I'm not successful because I haven't got some of the things that other people have, like a family or children, yet. So people's success is different things to different people, but I am content, and content plus aspiring for more challenges. So yeah.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have an elder sister. Yeah.
Okay, because it's always interesting to see, how siblings. Is she like your mom or your dad?
You know what? She's more like my mum, but she's the artistic. She's the creative. I'm very much a little. I like being creative, but hey, man, be creative and make some money as well. I'm very much like that. Like there's a practical side of me that's like, yeah, okay, we've had enough chit chat, we've had enough talk about mindset. Let's go out and do it now. There's a very much. So I think but she's very creative, and she was actually a very important person, because we couldn't afford a piano when I was growing up, and it sounds like they're living in sackcloth, and we had like eating porridge and stuff like that. Sorry, let me just can you hear me?
Yep.
Is that okay? Can you still hear me? Yeah. But she actually said, okay, let's come up with a really great idea. So she actually stuck loads of A4 pages together. She drew a keyboard, and she taught me how to play piano on paper. So when we bought the piano, now this is a very important concept as well. It's visualization, mental rehearsing, and practicing without the need for anything around you. So before I do surgery, I always rehearse exactly what's going to happen, visualize, and go through it in detail. So before I've even done the surgery, the operation's done. So I've got very clear outcomes. Like before I go into a deal, I will always make sure I know exactly what's the best price. I'm never going to go over that. I've got limits. I set the limits very clearly. I also know when I see a property exactly what I'm going to try and do with it. I don't go in there and go, oh, we could do this, we could do that. So this property has to be used for this to get this goal. I set the goal really, really clearly, and really make sure. And I think that started very early on, and that learning on piano, the whole purpose was, that's right. You say you do not need a laptop, you do not need a phone. You've got your own mind. You've got your own mind. That's going to be the thing. That's your best toolbox, and you can use that anytime, anywhere. And the power of conversation, and the power of people who are going to problem solve together, that's your toolbox. You can leverage that at any time. You don't need to have equipment. You don't need to have any expenses. You can keep zero expenses and still be very successful. So that's what I'm saying. That's the key, coming back to always that you have the tools in you. Always. It's just whether you realize you've got them or not. That's important.
I love that. I knew there was a reason why I asked you if you had a sister, because that is profound. It kind of reminds me of when my husband and I did tango as our first wedding dance. And I used to sit on the tube with the song in my ears, close my eyes, and I rehearsed that in my mind the whole time. And there's actually research that shows that if you exercise in your mind, your muscles will grow. So there is that huge, you can trick your mind into believing anything that you wanted to believe. So it's about those choices that you make. And okay, so you've got another passion, and that's supercars. Do you race supercars?
No, I don't. My racing times were pretty awful, to be honest with you. I remember I drove. I had a Lotus, and I was driving. It's the James Bond Lotus. It's free. Everyone may remember Roger Moore driving around it. It had a kind of couple of versions more modern than that. And I remember I heard it creaking on the way down to Goodwood Race Circuit. I thought, this is strange, it's creaking. But maybe it's the sunroof, and it was the sunroof. And I remember I thought, oh, I'll leave it alone, it'll be fine. And I drove it on the track. I went up to about 130 miles an hour, and the sunroof shattered. And I remember the glass went all down my neck. I had glass in my, believe it or not, I had glass in my trousers. And I couldn't believe it. I got out of the car, and everyone said, where's the sunroof? And I said, it's shattered. And they go, God, where's all this glass? Was everywhere. It was in the seat wells. It was all around the gear stick. It was awful. So my experiences were funny. I remember I used to always, cars and me were always like, if a car made it from A to B without breaking down, that was a miracle, absolute miracle. I mean, I'm still experiencing the same thing today. So, I didn't race cars. My other passion is dancing. Dancing was a very big thing for me, and I still dance. And dancing for me is a beautiful way. You mentioned the tango, but I love dancing. Yeah, I think dancing for me is perfect communication. That is the perfect essence between a relationship. Problem solving, but creating something beautiful together. And it's physical, and it requires, there's pain, there's injury, there's all these other things to get to that beautiful end result. But it's amazing, and I think dancing for me is a great metaphor for life. And it's cool.
It was important for me because I'm such a go-getter. I was forced to not lead. I was forced to be led.
Well, that's the other thing with men and women now. It's so funny, but I think men are in a very difficult position with like etiquette now.
Yeah.
And we've got some things that, I was thinking about this on the tube, like if a lady gets in, if I stood up and said, oh, would you like my seat? Okay, it's fine. They still like it. I find majority do. But then also there's an element of, well, then you've got things like people say, well, are we trying to be the same? You can get into a lot of confusion here. The one thing I like about dancing, the way I think about the dancing relationship, is the man is a picture frame. It's very solid. He has a foundation. The lady creates is within the frame. The frame has to be strong. The frame has to be good. You can't have the picture just loose and wandering around, or stuck on with blue tack. You've got to have the frame, and then the frame supports, but also it has elements of definition and edge to the picture, so where the picture begins and ends. And I think the beauty within that frame comes through the lady expressing herself. So classic examples, when you're dancing, you can, as a man, have incredible presence and intensity through what I'd call less flamboyant movements, whereas a lady can be very flamboyant, but then also you can suddenly surprise everyone with something incredibly powerful. But it's a different way of thinking. So it's a whole other podcast or interview, dancing, the male-female etiquette, how we work as a, there's lots of things going on there that we can talk about, which probably would go off feast, but then, that's how great ideas are formed. So I think chivalry is not dead, and there's just nothing better in life than I think South Africans, I remember, just a quick one because we've only got a few minutes left, but it's so funny. I remember going to I had close South African friends, and they invited me to their wedding. And I remember there was this, on the menu, it said rack of lamb. So all the guys said, yeah, rack of lamb. I'm looking forward to this. It came out, it was literally like half a lamb each that we had, the rib cage. And the women were like thinking, oh my God, this rack of lamb. And there's very much like, this is, I don't know, maybe South Africa's now more, I feel in the UK, we've become a little bit like, I even, the fact that I drive a petrol car, I eat steak.
Yeah.
I feel like even I could be like, heavily criticized now. I feel vulnerable when I go out for dinner, but I pulled up in my lamb, but oh my God, he's eating a steak. Like, oh God, Greenpeace are going to come out and they're going to punish me. But I am who I am, and I mean, I get all the other things people are talking about, but I am me, and that's me. So it's like action movies. You've got to have an action movie. It's got to be big. It's got to be loud. That's what guys like to go and see. I'm very much like that, but chivalry is important for me.
And I think you're fabulous, and I just want to go back to something, just a concept which I think is so important, which you were brought up in a family where money was discussed. It was quite clear that you have to make money if you're going to lead a good life, and that came from your mom. I'm very much like that as well, more so than my husband, and my son. I'll never forget when he was 3 years old. We were in the park and he was trying to move a rock, and he said to me, "How much will you give me if I can move this rock?" And I said, "I'll give you R1,000,000 if you can move that rock." And he was trying so hard to move this rock. And then I said to him, "What will you do with the money if I give you R1,000,000? What are you going to do with it?" And he didn't even bat an eyelid. He looked at me and he said, "Use it to make more money." And I'll never forget that. And he is that budding entrepreneur. And I feel that in society is something is what you've just been alluding to, is that one has to apologize for the Lamborghini, apologize for, the glitz and the glam and all the good stuff, and not talk about it and all the rest of it. And I think that's wrong, because like I said earlier, we've got a short time on this earth. We've got to make an impact. We've got to do what we can do.
That's right.
And do you agree? That's shy.
That's right. I think it comes back to childhood. Are we going to crush every child's dreams? Because that's actually what happens. They say they want to be an astronaut. Okay, so why aren't they meeting other astronauts? Why don't when I said I wanted to be a surgeon, it's kind of like, go to medical school. If you want to own a supercar, you've got to meet a supercar owner, right? You've got to, and that's what my mum did. She made me. There was a chap I actually know, my friend who's a Lambo mechanic. He actually has this guy as his customer. His name's Robin. He owned a Diablo, Lamborghini Diablo. And I remember my mum said, "We should meet him." I said, "Oh no, I'm so scared." I met him. Lovely guy. Said, "Yeah, I go to the factory. This is how the car's made. Yeah, you've got to do this." You've got to meet the people who are doing what you're doing. I can 100% honest tell you, I never met a doctor I wanted to be like. Never did. I never looked at my boss and said, "I want to be like you." They didn't have what I wanted. I didn't feel I had that kindred spirit with them. The people I appealed to, if you had to say, if I could have met anyone, it would have been Prince. Prince was like everything I wanted to be. He was dangerous. He was edgy. He was controversial. You didn't know whether he was going, you didn't know which way he was going to go. And also, you had to be brave to like him, because everyone was into Michael Jackson. At school, we used to sit on you couldn't, it was like the Michael Jackson group were there, and then the Prince group was like there. It was like tiny, and it was full of the kind of, alternative people, like, colorful hair, or, they were wearing different like jewelry and had piercings everywhere. That exactly appeals to me. So for me, that's important. I said, maybe that's why Ice Cube said this in an interview, and I'll nick it from Ice Cube because I think he's an amazing entrepreneur as well. He said, people ask me why my trousers were so tight when I used to go out sometimes clubbing. I said, that's because I was into Prince. And the same with me, I used to say, maybe that's why my trousers were so tight when I was growing up, because I was into Prince. But he was great. And also he had a singular vision of what his brand, his business, him and Bowie were very powerful in separating the business from actually creativity and owning their music. He was the second artist. Bowie was the first, and he was the second to go off the mainstream music labels and create music through social media. So that forward thinking there, he got criticized so heavily at the time. I remember it. But that is exactly what's happened now. So you cannot be accepted at your present time. You have to be accepted. You're going to be rejected. Like me being a doctor and talking about money and being property investing, there's loads of people on the NHS who are going to say this guy is maybe selfish, or he just talks about stuff that, it's taboo. It may not be accepted, but I'm not doing it for this generation. I'm gonna have to head off to a call, but I really want. This is very important for me. It's vital that the generation that's younger than us is wealthier than us, healthier than us, and kinder. And that's my aim. And that's my aim for doing this. And that's my aim for my mission. Because even if I don't have children or family, there will be a legacy of education that's instilled in people to be, you do not want the younger generation to be poorer than you, because when you get old, you're going to be needing their strength, their spirit, their enthusiasm to keep you going, to keep you alive. We want the youth to be empowered. And what I think is sad is that society has done its best historically through schools, education, to keep that childhood dream down.
Yeah.
you're like, oh no, you can't. Only certain people. No, anyone can have this. Anyone can do this. I believe in that, and I know that, and I know it from experience. So if I look at something, I don't envy someone. If I look at something, say, right, I would like to do this, I can do it. But I have to reverse engineer. I've got to meet the person who can do it, learn from them, spend time with them, discipline myself, and then do it. And that's why mentorship is important and your network is important. And by doing that, then we can but it's very, very important that the generation that is coming up is wealthier than us, healthier than us, and kinder than us. That's going to keep us going, and they can do the same for the generation under them.
Yeah.
We pay respect to our elders, but we should be really opening the doors to all our algorithms and how we became successful to day one of birth.
Yeah.
That they're nurtured, and that nurturing is what's lacking I see in a lot of education and a lot of university. And a lot of people only get it. It's very lonely being a business owner, but you only get it when you network with other business owners and connect and you say, God, this is so hard. Fine, we're together, and you can nurture each other. And I think that's where I come in. That's important for me.
That
That's my powerful statement to you.
I love it. And that's the most beautiful way to end, because you're such a busy man. So I'm going to let you get on with your day.
Thank you.
And I just want to say thank you for your insights, for letting us know a little bit about you. And we're really excited to see you at the summit.
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you for asking me. Thanks for following me. If you want to follow me, you can follow me on LinkedIn. It's just Mark Sheldon Lloyd. Instagram, just my name, Mark Sheldon Lloyd, and also Facebook as well. Just have a chat with me. I think that's important. And thanks, Robin, and thanks for really encouraging me to be part of this. And I'm very honoured, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.